Proverbs 3, verse 7. It has some strange ways of working. Like I mentioned this morning, that Bible translation is a difficult thing. You either do word for word or thought for thought, or try to do your best in the middle. One thing that I used for years, and I think for most people would really be good, is Zondervan put out a interlinear New Testament that was King James, New International, and the Greek interlinear. So you had a pretty good thought for thought and a pretty good word for word, and if reading them both confused you, you had the exact Greek word with the exact English equivalent to look at. And I found that to be probably more useful than all the commentaries that you could get. It just lets you look at the scriptures. Verse 7 in Proverbs 3 is, "Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil." Don't you think that's kind of a funny thing to be said by Solomon, the wisest man in the face of the earth? It just seems a little, be not wise. Well, you're wise, but even he had to learn to not be wise in his own eyes, not to think too highly of his wisdom, and to realize that the wisdom he had came from someone else. That is an important thing that we all need to know. One little thing that I wish that they would teach all high school students is everyone you meet can teach you something. I don't care whether it is a developmentally disabled child or a college professor. There is something that every person you meet knows that you don't. There's a wisdom that they've learned that you haven't. I wish that the School of Hard Knocks was not the university that all of us go to. I wish that most of us could learn from other people's mistakes. It doesn't seem to happen that way very often. But be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. A lot of people have problems with that phrase, fear the Lord. Yes, we should love God. But we need to have a modicum of fear. I don't know about you, but when I was 16 to 25, my common sense meter was not working very well. There were a lot of things that an intelligent person wouldn't do that I did. But I'm standing here today because another meter worked. It was, if I do that, I'm going to get in trouble. Fear of my parents. Fear of how they would react. Fear of how it would look on them. But those kind of things, that kind of a fear, not a constant trembling, but I think most of us can remember some time when we were getting ready to do something that would have been disastrous. And we said, no, I I can't do that. That just would not fly. That wouldn't work. And that same concept was one of my parenting tips to my kids. You know, they can get in more trouble than you dreamed of. I got in a lot of trouble that my parents didn't have any idea that you could get in trouble doing. Well, every generation finds new ways to get in trouble. You know, they really do. I told my kids, anytime that something comes up that you really don't want to do, all you have to say is, I promised my dad I wouldn't do that, and I don't want to get him mad. You don't want to get him mad. But you make me the bad guy, it's okay. Because if I'd known about it, I would have said don't do it. And they know it. So that was always an easy way to get out of those peer pressure problems. Nope. You mean you're afraid of what your dad will do? Yes, I am. He'll sit me down and he'll lecture me for 3 or 4 hours. They hated that worse than a beating. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Don't play chicken with evil. Turn away from it. Don't see how close you can drive to it. Don't see how far away you can get either. But when you see it, turn away from it. React. You know, sometimes I think that living the Christian life, if you've really read the Bible, is like defensive driving. You're looking way ahead. You don't wait. When you see those brake lights go on that car up there, even if you're half a block back, you take your foot off the gas. You may not put your brakes on yet, but you start preparing. That's what it talks about being, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Look ahead. Know that there's punishment. And say, I really don't want that. And then, when you see evil, turn away from it. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. You may not believe it, but doing right will make you feel good. That's what that is in English. Doing right will make you feel good physically. This is something that I've been trying to stress because I think it's something that we have totally forgotten, is that God never said something was sin just because it was Tuesday and he didn't like French fries. He said things were sin because they were bad for us. We may not always see how bad they are, but they're bad for us. Understand that living the good life, the Christian life, is one that is good for you physically as well as spiritually. It makes you good. We now find out that so many diseases are made worse because of our mind, because of our attitudes, because of our... Oh, you mean living a Christian life? Having that peace that passes understanding, knowing that you have a safety net out there, God is looking out for you, that can add years to your life. That thing, it will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty. Do this, this will happen. Now, know that these are generalities. You know what? Sometimes bad things happen to good people. Okay? But in the end, it's always good that comes to good people. It may be a rocky road to get there sometimes, but it's always good. But there's a principle here. The first fruits of all their produce was part of the gifts that you had to give to God as a Jew. Just like your tithes, just as all of that. Do you notice he didn't say, give your first fruits, give your tithes, give all of that. That's important. But he started off with saying something else. Honor the Lord with your wealth. Not just with what you put in the basket. Honor the Lord with what you have. Use what you have to give God honor. I believe that he's trying to tell us that everything he gives us should be given to his purposes in some way or another. Well, what do you mean? Wearing good clothes, how's that honor? That honors God by not looking like a bum. There are so many things that if you change your way of looking at them, these are ways that you can honor God. How many of you have a car that you've loaned to somebody else? How many have gone and picked up somebody and taken them somewhere? The collection should be the least of what we give to God. That's what we give back to say, this is going to be for your use without my input. Everything else should be used to glorify him with our input. And your vats will be bursting with wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves. Sometimes things happen to us to remind us that we're doing wrong. What happens is sin, as I said, is always harmful. Sometimes God takes that hedge he has around all of us Christians and he lowers it 2 feet. So we get a small taste of what we deserve. That's the Lord's reproof. When he lowers his hedge and allows what would have happened anyway to touch you. As a father, the son in whom he delights. We have totally turned this principle around so much that when we read this, it makes no sense to a lot of people today. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. In our world today, what do you do to your children that you love? You give them everything. You protect them from all harm. You don't yell at them. You don't punish them. You don't say they're doing something wrong because that might hurt their little psyches. Too many people, when they read this, they don't understand what it's talking about. Because in their world, the father does not reprove his son. He doesn't set limits. I'm sure that you have seen, as we all have, all the news about celebrities' children getting in trouble. They didn't have to work in the field the way some of you guys did. They never got their rear end whipped for doing wrong like some of us did. And the result of not reproving your children is always going to be somebody else is going to have to reprove them. I mean, I can't complain too much. I made a good living for 23 years and living off the retirement now from taking care of children whose parents did not reprove them. But it would sure been a whole lot better if that job didn't even exist, if people had disciplined their children so that they had a fear of the Lord. There is so much that we can learn from Solomon because he was wise. And it's so funny to look at some of these things like this and going, how much has the world changed when you couldn't go to a group of people and say, you know, God is going to reprove you. Things are going to happen sometimes. They're going to wake you up. You're going to get a little taste of punishment once in a while. Just like a father does to his children. And they go, what are you talking about? It's time that we put wisdom back into our families and into our culture. That we take care of everything. And like in everything else, change starts with me. It doesn't start with somebody else. It doesn't start with the president. It doesn't start with the school system. Change starts with me. And a good saying I heard once is complaining about a problem without a solution is just whining. And another one of the things that I think fits in with Proverbs is it is better to light a single candle than curse the darkness. That didn't come from a Christian preacher, but it comes from Christian principles. If we want this world to be a better place for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, we have to be better people. Don't worry about anybody else, because both good and evil is like leaven. It will spread. In this world today, we need a lot more good leaven. If anybody needs to answer the invitation, come now as we sing number 912.